way, and it's always that way every generation. I think we go from one pole to another pole. We tend to bounce around.
I'm not sure what this bad thing is all about. I mean, I think there is a sort of widespread rejection amongst younger people who are educated in the sense that they are able to analyse what's going on in the wider society, and they're wary of what the media is telling them, and they can weigh up the branding campaigns and the advertising. I think there is a rejection of all that so-called perceived excellence and beauty and all the Botox actresses and so on and so forth. Yeah. So I think that's quite healthy, and I think that's the way it's going. They're getting smarter.
One of the theories is that the reward of accolades, because everybody wants to be famous and rewarded and acknowledged and lauded, the reward of accolades has replaced respect for actual achievement in life. So you think, why bother? Why bother to do all the hard work I used to do when nobody ever notices? It's only those people on television or Instagram. I think that's one of the strands of thinking here.
I think that's true. I mean, you do seem to find fewer craftspeople in a number of trades now. I mean, you'll find excellent chefs and people take great pride in hospitality and that sort of thing, but you do that sort of generation of silent craftspeople, be they carpenters, furniture makers, panel beaters, whatever, they seem to be diminishing in number for some reason.
I would be so sad if that really is what is happening, because, as you know, we're not in a race with anybody else. We're only ever in a race with ourselves. And actually, true happiness comes to you when you are not trying to get the roar of the crowd, or you're trying to get people to pat you on the back. Because at the end of the day, what you find out as you get older is that actually everybody's thinking about themselves. They're actually not looking at you. And that the most important thing every day is that you feel that you did a good job. At the end of the day, that success is how you define it. And that it's not when somebody else tells you that you've succeeded that you have, but when you know in your own heart that you've succeeded because you did the best you could.
And it's very hard to argue with that, but maybe it's harder for people to convince themselves of it when, with all the gee-whizzery and look at this, and people succeeding with all the flash and dazzle around them.
Well, what that tells us, I think, is that given the generation that we're in, and with social media the way it is, that we have to work harder to talk to our young people and to talk to ourselves about the fact that that's not what life's actually all about. It's all fake and false. That actually it is really important to make sure that you are becoming a person of depth, and I think ultimately who you really are is what you'll do when no one's watching.
Yes, that's right.
It's possible now. I was watching a young couple the other day. I was in Wellington, and he was throwing a basketball through a hoop, and he had his girlfriend filming him, and I could hear the conversation. Every time the ball didn't go in, he said, delete that, delete that. They were obviously going to post it somewhere. And I thought to myself, that's what that whole accolade thing is about. How sad.
If only you could alter the matrix and delete it as you went, the whole of life. British newspapers, just before we go, are picking up on the resurgence of interest post-Brexit in New Zealand as a place for British people to emigrate to. And it's the most read article in The Guardian today. And being quoted as Professor John Morgan, British expat, academic at the University of Auckland, who says correctly, there is this pervading idea that New Zealand's some sort of relic of 1950s Britain, a place to go back to in time. And that is not true, but it is generally true that New Zealand does avoid the worst trappings of modern consumerist culture. So far, so good. And then Prof Morgan says there is a rush hour in New Zealand, but it is just an hour. Well, not in Auckland. What is it like in Christchurch at the moment, Gary?
It's if you're going north of Christchurch, it's certainly more than an hour in rush hour. But, you know, the rest of the Christchurch, probably an hour is probably fair.
All right. My niece, just with your talk about children going overseas, my niece had a fab history trip to the US with her Auckland state school. Most whole families couldn't afford the trip like this. So fantastic opportunity for individuals when they have to work so hard on NCEA, says Sue. Sue doesn't say how it was funded. I suppose there's two sides, as we said, aren't there, Gary? The paying for it and the enjoying of it.
That's exactly right. There are a lot of sausage sizzles involved, I suspect.
A lot of sausage sizzles. Gary McCormick, thank you so much for being on the panel today.
You're welcome.
And May Chen, too, in your busy life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
And that is us. Thanks, everybody. We are back tomorrow. Checkpoint with John Campbell on the way.
Kia ora everyone, I'm John Campbell. On behalf of the team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Ko te maira I hoa mā he kōrero, kei te haere hei kaupapa, kei te karawhiua. Tonight, Havelock North workers hit in the pocket by the ongoing water crisis will be entitled to compensation. We understand this will be announced tomorrow. They'll have to go through wins to get it. But what of businesses? Some have lost tens of thousands of dollars. The family of an elderly man mistreated in his rest home say they're relieved the caregiver has been charged. We hear Pity's story. Also tonight, the government wants to let children ditch the classroom and study from home at online schools run by tertiary institution schools or private companies, plus Easter trading. And it sounds a bit like an Agatha Christie book, The Mystery Noise, The Sleepless Couple and The Chinese Restaurant. All of that and much more coming up. But first, RNZ News with Katrina Batten.
Kia ora, good afternoon. The government will tomorrow announce a welfare and financial support package for people caught up in the Havelock North water contamination disaster. More than 4,000 people have been hit by gastric illness after the town's water supply was contaminated with Campylobacter. The Hastings Mayor, Lawrence Yule, has given an early sign of what is to be announced. He says the aid package will cover loss of income, among other factors.
It can help with living expenses if you need something urgently, unexpected bills, those types of things, or you can't afford to pay for it. And might look at things like medical costs, bedding, food, rent, power bills. This is not open slather, there's a system you have to go through to apply for it.
Lawrence Yule. A separate package to help businesses is to be discussed by the Council on Thursday, in addition to the government support. The Havelock North Rest Home, where an 89-year-old woman died, is in lockdown following another outbreak of Campylobacter. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board has confirmed a unit at the Mary Doyle Life Care is closed to visitors and 5 people are ill. A board spokesperson says it expected there might be another wave of illness, particularly amongst the elderly. Jean Sparksman, who lived at the Mary Doyle home, died almost a fortnight ago, 4 days after becoming ill from Campylobacter. The son of a man apparently assaulted at a rest home says he's disappointed by the authorities' response. A 23-year-old woman has been charged with assault at the Cascades Retirement Home in Hamilton in June. The charge comes after the Stuff website posted a video showing a caregiver slapping and mishandling Piri Hemi, who has dementia and limited mobility. The 86-year-old son, Alan Hemi, says they took the footage after the rest home failed to respond to complaints about his treatment.
All our questions that we asked the manager, they weren't getting answered, so my niece suggested that we get a camera and we put it by his bed so we could see actually what's happening. And yeah, we got quite a fright when we seen the footage.
Alan Hemi says the family had been trying to get action from the police and the Waikato District Health Board. He says it's interesting a charge was laid after they went to the media, and you can hear the interview on Checkpoint shortly. The Justice Minister says there's been no formal request to extradite a controversial businessman who's 5th on Beijing's most wanted fugitives list. William Yan, who's also been known as Bill Liu, Yang Liu and Yongming Yan, will hand over almost $43 million worth of property in a record settlement over alleged money laundering. The police say it follows a complex 3-year investigation into laundering of large sums from a series of frauds the Chinese authorities say were carried out in China between 1999 and 2001. They say the settlement is the largest forfeiture in New Zealand and ends proceedings without any admission of criminal or civil liability. The Minister, Amy Adams, says there hasn't been a request, but China has made contact informally with Justice Ministry officials. The government has proposed a law change that would let children leave regular schools and study from home at online schools. The change to the Education Act would allow companies, schools and tertiary institutions to set up the schools, which would be known as communities of online learning. The Post-Primary Teachers Association and the Educational Institute say the change would let private companies profit from government spending on schools. Government documents say only Te Kura, what used to be called the correspondence school, can offer distance learning. They say that needs to change because technology is blurring the lines between face-to-face and online learning. A Fijian woman is giving evidence against a man who was accused of trafficking her into the country, says she feels ashamed that she fell for the scam. Faroz Ali is on trial at the High Court in Auckland on charges of trafficking and helping 16 Fijian workers to unlawfully enter New Zealand in 2014. One worker, Suliana Vatanivula, told the court she borrowed money from friends and family in order to pay the fees that Mr. Ali and his sister-in-law demanded to secure work and a visa. She says she was promised $17 an hour, but when she arrived in New Zealand, she was told all of her pay went towards the accommodation provided for her.
People tend to look at me differently because I didn't have any money to pay them back. I tried very hard to pay them back, and at the moment, I still owe a lot of people a lot of money. And when I go out, I feel ashamed to see them.
Suliana Vatanivula giving evidence at the High Court in Auckland. To sport, the All Blacks assistant coach Ian Foster says he was impressed with young Auckland centre Rieko Ioane's first training session today. Ioane has entered the fold after a spate of injuries before and during the side's 42-8 win over Australia on Saturday. 5 replacements got the call-up, including Ioane, who's 19. Foster says he settled in well, but good things take time.
I think it was his first training with us. He looked like he was really keen, excited, trained well. There's a few new faces obviously today. I think it takes a lot of hard work, and first and foremost from them to actually get up to speed, from their peers, from the guys and play in the same position. They do a lot of work with those guys to get them up to speed, and I guess the expectations are there that they come up to speed pretty quick.
Ian Foster, the side will retain the Bledisloe Cup if they beat the Wallabies in Wellington on Saturday night. The Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic have announced the Silver Ferns veteran Casey Korpua is among several signings for this season's domestic netball championships. Grace Rasmussen, Sam Sinclair, Kelly Jury and Monica Faulkner will also join newly appointed coach Margaret Forsyth. The tennis player Marina Irakovic has hired a new coach ahead of the US Open next week. She's replaced her coach of the past 2.5 years, Eduardo Nicolas, with the Auckland-based Wesley Whitehouse. That's the news.
Bugging John Key.
Well, in some instances I wouldn't know who's behind it, and I certainly wouldn't comment even if I did know. I'm just saying it's widespread.
A bug in the water.
We need to start looking at how this can happen, what other land uses might affect it, what's planned for the future that could put us at greater risk.
Dicing with Don.
A man got out of the car, started waving this very large sword around. It was quite the most unusual experience I've ever seen.
Cutting Edge News. Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall. Morning reports, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, how should communities react when serious sexual offenders are released in their midst? And do they need more support? And after 10, the charming tale of a Mangere couple who've been growing greens together for more than 60 years. Join me, Lynn Freeman, after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to tomorrow midnight in the north and west from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country. High cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in the afternoon or evening, possibly heavy about Auckland and Northland later. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloud and drizzle spreading north tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, mainly fine but late drizzle for coastal Marlborough. Rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening. Canterbury and Otago, cloud increasing, patchy drizzle developing about eastern areas later today. Tomorrow, rain developing about in the afternoon or evening with snow to about 600 metres inland. Southland mainly fine but scattered rain late tomorrow. Fiordland rain at times and the Chatham Islands showers and cold southerlies developing tonight, then clearing later tomorrow. It is coming up to 5:09.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina. Last night on Checkpoint we spoke to a professor in freshwater ecology from Massey University who told us he wasn't surprised the town water supply became contaminated in Havelock North, and that areas of New Zealand in which the runoff from intensive farming is entering rivers or water tables may well experience something similar in the future. Today we've spoken to 3 other scientists who've told us the same thing. Given the impact of this contamination on Havelock North, we wanted to talk to the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment about this. Dr Jan Wright has written of the poor water quality in many lowland places. So how is a balancing act achieved with farming intensification concentrating the amount of urine and faeces going into the soil? How can rivers, aquifers and water tables be protected without chasing farmers off the land? Dr Wright declined our invitation to discuss this or the general issue of water quality in New Zealand. It's 5 on Checkpoint. In Havelock North, they're able to quantify the cost of poor water quality, and in breaking news, the Hastings District Council has decided to supply Havelock North's water from the Hastings water system for the foreseeable future. Over 4,000 people sick and businesses still trying to find their feet after the most difficult week many of them have ever had. Liv Reynolds, who's part of the company that owns 3 restaurants, the Joel Road Cafe, Mama Cheetah and Hugo Chang, says it's been a double whammy. Friends and family really sick. And as for the business itself?
It's been a huge knock in terms of revenue. It's been a huge knock in terms of our staff going down. It's been a huge knock in terms of the increase of expenses to keep these places open. So, it's been rough, I'm not going to lie.
Liv, I'm sorry, because these are very personal questions and you don't have to answer them, obviously, but you talk about a huge knock. Can we quantify that? In financial terms, what has this been costing you a day, roughly?
I mean, all in all, it's tens of thousands of dollars. At its worst, across the 3 establishments, we were losing about $8,000 a day. The impacts in a week has been tens of thousands of dollars.
And once again, this is a personal question, but can you afford to lose tens of thousands of dollars? Did you have it to lose?
This time of year is tough anyway. I mean, we didn't need any assistance to make this time of year hard for Hawke's Bay businesses. So we absolutely did not have that money to lose. I don't think anyone did, to be honest. It came out of absolutely nowhere. No one had time to prepare for it. And we're still scrambling to try and compensate in some way just within our own, with what we can contribute to try and scuttle our ways out of it.
So you are losing thousands of dollars. You have been losing thousands of dollars a day in revenue. Are you still paying your staff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think through this, I've got payroll today and I've had my head buried under bits of paperwork with sick leave request forms, etc. We've got just under 50 staff on our books, but we are adamant that we will do whatever we can to make sure that our staff get paid what they are entitled to and beyond that. So, and we were having to force closure of our 3 establishments due to the fact we just simply didn't have the manpower, and we didn't. And we were worried. We didn't have the information we needed from the council to deem it safe to open, so we were forced to close. However, we're going to pay our staff for the hours they were rostered on those forced closed days, purely because it's not fair that they have to bear the brunt of this. They've got families at home that are all suffering. They've got extra expenses that they're having to go through with buying bottled water, buying hand sanitizer, buying more nappies for their babies. So we're doing everything we can, with our staff being the absolute pinnacle of our priority of making sure that they are looked after first and foremost. We've been lucky to juggle things in order to get through, but to be honest, we've got creditors that were due, a few days ago, creditor payments. It was the 20th. We've got rent coming out on the 1st, and what I think grinds us more than anything is we've got our rates that'll still go out, our rate payments and our insurance payments.
Hold on a sec, I want to come in there. Your rates to the council that created this by not being able to provide you with clean municipal water.
Isn't that painful? It's the money, the rates. We're never late on our rate payments, and we're never late on our insurance payments.
You must be actually tempted to tell them what they can do with their rates, Liv.
I'm sure people have voiced it, yes.
And so, in terms of compensation, because through no fault of your own, you are tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket, you are still paying staff who have been unable to work either because they've been sick or your businesses have been closed, or both. What would you like to see in terms of a compensation package of some description from the council or from the government?
As a start, John, I think businesses would just like the assurance that it's even being looked into. At this stage, we don't even feel like it's even on the radar in terms of priority. And we've been pretty patient in waiting for, we're aware of the fact that the priority is trying to get to the source of this issue. So we've sort of sat tight and we're waiting for some answers which seem to be taking forever. But we just need to know that at some point there's going to be serious consideration into whether businesses get compensation and how they get compensation. Our insurance companies have all come back and said, look, sorry guys, this is deemed a contagious disease. It's not, you won't be getting anything from us. So it has to go to a government level in order for us to get, at least some assurance that compensation may even be on the horizon.
Liv Reynolds, whose business has lost, as you heard, tens of thousands of dollars. Now, the Hastings District Mayor is Lawrence Yule. Just before we came on air, I asked him if the council is in a position to offer business owners any kind of compensation.
No, we're not, but I know the government is likely tomorrow to announce a package which will be really helpful for them in terms of, as I understand, it's going to support people that have been off work, people for being ill themselves, people who have been off work looking after sick family, and people who haven't been out of work because of the workplace has been closed. So, and I also think there's some other immediate hardship issues around rent and power bills and things like that. But what my council is doing to support that is working with the Business Association to see what we can do as part of an economic, resurrection package.
Sorry, can I cut in there? Have you seen this package, this compensation package from the government? Are you in possession of it? Do you have it in advance of the announcement tomorrow?
I've got a suggested draft of an announcement for tomorrow.
And that's coming from which minister?
I don't know the minister. It's just coming from the government that I'm aware of. It's just been given to me as a
courtesy, almost.
As a courtesy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
And as the mayor of the Hastings district, and you will know many of the people involved, and you will know many of the businesses involved, do you feel this is a fair and reasonable response from the government?
For a start, I don't know the amount or what are the exact criteria, so I can't answer that, and that will be no doubt put out tomorrow. But I think their attempt, and I think it's actually a really genuine attempt to help those people that have, been significantly sort of financially harmed by this. I think it's a really good thing they're doing. Now, what I can't say is how much people are getting paid and all that. That's all in the terms. But I think they've covered off the people that have been made vulnerable or disadvantaged by this.
Okay, and so this will be on the table for people to consider tomorrow?
Correct.
Will they have to work through a government agency to get that? How will people get access to money if indeed money is available?
Yes, I think it will be through a government agency. It's likely to be through work and income, as I understand it.
Okay, and so that's for individuals, people made sick, who were unable to work and therefore have lost either sick days or salary. What about businesses?
Well, businesses, I think we are still working with businesses as a council, and so we're looking at a business sort of restoration type package. I can't give you the details of what the government might be doing in that space yet because I don't know. But certainly we are very cognizant that there has been some damage to businesses out there.
Thousands of dollars. So yes, I've spoken to one business who says they've lost tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, I haven't heard that myself, but I mean they have lost thousands and thousands of dollars. There's no question about that. And some of them lose it in different forms. If your business was closed and your employees couldn't come to work, and you still have to pay them, even though you're getting no income, that's one. Some businesses closed because the employees were so sick that they couldn't have enough employees to be in businesses. And a large number had a whole week where it was sort of like a ghost town and there was nobody buying anything.
Right, so what do you say to those people? What is going to be the council's offer and or the government's offer to those business owners?
I don't know that yet, and we are looking at a variety of options. I've met with the Business Association in Havelock North. I've asked them to tell me how they thought we should do this. They've come back to me with some options which we're considering, and I'm putting that to my councillors on Thursday.
And what options are you considering?
Oh, there's all sorts of options, but I think it's going to get difficult to get down to individual type means-tested type package of one business versus another. So we're trying to make this as simple as possible in a way that will benefit the majority that is reasonably fair.
Okay, so to summarise what we've learned from this discussion, workers who are out of pocket through loss of income, it's your understanding that they will be able to go through WINS and get some form of financial compensation. Businesses, you are still working with your council and the local Chamber of Commerce Business Association to come back with a formal, meaningful offer.
Correct.
So we're just learning that from Lawrence Yule, the Mayor of Hastings district. That's what he's been told. That's what he believes is going to happen both tomorrow and later in the week. Meanwhile, a Hawke's Bay school is deciding what to do next after it was forced to close this morning when E. coli was detected in its water. Now, Moana School, which has 180 students, is situated about 13k from Havelock North. This morning, test results showed E. coli in the water, which is drawn from a private bore. So whilst this may come from similar groundwater or aquifers, it's not the same bore and it's not a council bore. Principal Jane Gallen says the water was shut off and the school was closed as a precaution. She says the result may be a false positive and the water is being retested. She spoke to our reporter Catherine Hutton and started by telling her the school has so far managed to avoid an outbreak.
Most schools in Hawke's Bay, when a risk was identified, we followed all health department advice and got the sanitizer and took precautions. So yes, we have avoided the extent of it.
But then yesterday you retested the water?
Yes, we've been increasingly proactive, testing our water more regularly just to ensure that it is safe. And this morning, the results from yesterday indicated a presence of E. coli in our water system. At this stage, it could be a false positive. We're not sure, but like any proactive school, we swung into action and worked with the Ministry of Education and with our local DHB advice to ensure that our water quality is safe and retested, and of course won't know tomorrow whether there is a presence which needs to be managed or whether it is a false positive.
So what time did you close the school?
Our school closed at 11 o'clock today.
Right. Will it open tomorrow?
That will be a discussion when we work with agencies and the Board of Trustees this afternoon and look at best practice and advise the parents in due course.
And when will you know the outcome of the test results from today?
22 hours after it was put in, so that won't be known until after 9 o'clock tomorrow.
And have any students reported symptoms?
No more than normal. There's been no spike of illness in our school. Any school, when you've got so many children and some live in other areas, there has been an incident today. We've got 3 children away, which is no different than most other days. 3 children with indicators of some sort of stomach upset, which has been similar for about the last 8-9 days. So there has been no spike.
That was the principal of Moana School talking to our reporter Catherine Hutton. Coming up on Checkpoint, the family of an elderly man mistreated in his rest home tell us about what happened and how relieved they are the caregiver in question has been charged. Pressure mounts on the National Party to allow MPs to cast a conscience vote on Easter trading legislation and ditching the classroom. In fact, we're going to look at that in about 20 seconds. We'd love your feedback on any of the subjects we cover tonight. You can text us on 2101. You can email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Our Twitter handle is @checkpointrnz. And don't forget our very busy Facebook page. Thank you for your feedback, however it's arriving. The government wants to let children ditch the classroom and study from home at online schools run by tertiary institutions, schools or private companies. It says the proposal future-proofs the education system. Teacher unions say it's opening the doors to wholesale privatisation of schooling and it has to be stopped. Our education correspondent, John Gerritsen, filed this report.
The change is part of a bill amending the Education Act, and if it becomes law, any school-aged child will be allowed to enrol in an online school instead of attending a regular school. The president of the Post-Primary Teachers Association, Angela Roberts, is shocked by the plan. She says schools are already working online and the proposed change is simply aimed at letting private entities profit from the school system.
This isn't the way to lift outcomes for our most vulnerable students. It's just going to allow privatisation and private providers to dip their hand into the public purse. And every time they get some money, we've been told there's nothing for the rest of the state system. So it's just outrageous in so many ways.
The president of the Educational Institute, Louise Green, says an online school will not work for primary school children.
There's a lot about learning that involves interaction and, getting along with other people and all of those kinds of things, learning through play and experimentation and things like that. It would be disastrous, actually, if online learning replaced good, holistic learning.
The online schools will be called communities of online learning and can be set up by schools, tertiary institutions or private companies. The Education Minister, Hekia Parata, says the approval process will be rigorous and the schools will help ensure the educational system is keeping pace with the times.
This is the 21st century and we want to make sure that New Zealand kids are digitally fluent, that they can take advantage of technology, that we can provide opportunities for learning and that those diverse options include online learning, blended learning and more traditional learning.
The Labour Party's education spokesperson, Chris Hipkins, is suspicious of the government's motivation.
I'm not entirely sure what the government's motivating agenda here is, but I suspect it's that they want to extend charter schools into the digital space, and the evidence of that internationally is not good.
Background written information on the proposal says it recognises the growing role of technology.
These changes will increase the education options for school-age students in New Zealand. It will mean that students will be able to choose from a greater number of education providers and have increased access to more subjects, particularly specialised subjects, and teaching expertise.
The information says Te Aho o Te Kura Pounamu, formerly known as the Correspondence School, will become an online school when the bill comes into force. For Checkpoint, John Gerritsen.
Just coming up to 26 minutes past 5. The family of Piri Hemi, an elderly man mistreated in his rest home, is relieved the caregiver in question has now been charged. Hidden camera footage showed the 86-year-old dementia patient being slapped by a caregiver at the Cascades Retirement Facility in Hamilton. Mr Hemi's son Alan has now moved his father out of the rest home with the family all caring for him now themselves. After weeks of nothing happening, since taking his story to the media yesterday, the caregiver has now been charged by police. I spoke to Alan Hemi this morning and asked him how his dad Piri is doing now that he's home.
He's actually really good, John. He's right now. He's just sitting in the seat. He's had a cup of coffee, a cup of tea not long ago, and he's singing. He's happy, he's smiling again. So that's the main thing.
And did he stop the singing and stop the smiling? Did you notice a real change in his temperament?
Yes, we did. After about only 3 weeks or so, we noticed he wasn't whistling, he wasn't singing, he was hardly talking, and he just looked blank. And my wife described it as his spirit was stolen. And it's about wraps it all up. I think his spirit was stolen, and then we went there one morning, not long after the 3 weeks, and I put my hand up, in the woody, and just said, "Kia ora, Dad," and then he covered his face up and says, don't hit me, yes, I'm dumb, don't hit me." And that brought some real concerns to us. So we had a bit of a family meeting, and my niece suggested that we get a camera. So we got a camera in the shape of a digital clock and with a motion sensor, and we put it by his bed so we could see actually what's happening. And a lot of the staff were great. They treated him like a king, and that made us really happy. But you can see this, the lady that assaulted my dad, she was totally different from the other caregivers. So we went to the police, to the district health board, and various other places, and things didn't really seem to be happening, especially with the district health board. The lady, I won't mention her name, she's supposed to be the portfolio lady for looking after the elderly. The first thing she said when I went there, my wife and I, she said, "I've seen the footage and your father being patted on the face." That was quite disturbing. I said, if I did that to an 86-year-old, I'd be in the hospital.
Alan,
I'd be in jail.
Sorry, forgive me. So this was somebody from the District Health Board described him your dad being patted on the face?
Yes, she said, I've seen the footage and I've seen the caregiver patting your father on the face.
And how would you describe the action?
Well, it's assault. And, when I looked at it, I didn't know what I felt. Really, I was hurt. I was mad, sad.
So do you think she was trying to minimise, sort of talk everyone down a bit, downplay it?
Yep, for sure. She heard what we were saying, but she didn't really listen.
And she'd seen the footage?
Yeah.
And so how vulnerable is your dad? How advanced is his dementia?
Well, it's pretty advanced. He can't hear properly, he can't see properly, he can't get up and walk or anything. He has to be assisted and everything.
Does he know who you are?
Sometimes he doesn't know who we are. Sometimes he doesn't know who we are, John. He doesn't even know who my mum is sometimes.
And how long have they been together for?
64 years they've been married.
So your dad is highly vulnerable,
Yep.
fragile, unable to speak for himself, unable to stand up for himself. Money is being paid. He is being really mistreated by this one person, and we must point out it was just one person.
Yes, like I said, some of the staff were great, you know, treated him like a king, and that made us happy. But yeah.
And you get him home, and suddenly you get your old dad back, do you?
Yeah, we did, and actually my wife and I and our family and my mum, we actually, you know, we started turning into humans again, because it made us feel really funny. My tolerance was gone, Mum's was, so was my wife's. We were getting angry at things which we shouldn't have been getting angry at, and I know it was just all stemming from this. When you got some doors closing on you, it's even worse. But we've had some news last night that the offender has been charged with assault.
Alan, the so-called caregiver who hit your dad and treated him so poorly, she would have been looking after other people too, wouldn't she?
Exactly. That's what scared us a bit too. Because you know, who else? If it was happening to our dad, because he can't speak for himself, you know, and there's a lot of people in this home that are just exactly like my dad, and we.
So very vulnerable and incapable of standing up for themselves.
Yeah, they sit them in a corner. They sit there most of the day. Every time we went to see my dad, he was sitting on the seat. He can't feed himself, and his sandwich was on the floor, and his cup of tea, which was hot, was, you know, sitting in front of him. So neglect is the word, I'd say. Yeah.
It's Alan Hemi, Piri's son, speaking to us earlier this afternoon. The Waikato District Health Board says it's sorry the family of Piri Hemi isn't satisfied with its response. Its Senior Planning Manager, Paul Keesing, spoke to our reporter Joe O'Brien.
I've seen the video, and it's clearly unacceptable behaviour, and it's not something that we'd want any family to go through.
What actions have you taken in response to the video?
So we've been in touch with Cascades. There's a number of corrective actions, 8 of them in fact, that we've been corresponding with them with. We require a full response around those corrective actions by the 31st of August.
Radio New Zealand has conducted an interview with Mr Hemi's son Alan. He seems to be disappointed at what he feels is a lack of action by the DHB and other authorities, and he feels as though the DHB have been downplaying what occurred. What is your response to that?
I'm sorry that the family feel our response wasn't what they expected. We have met with them to discuss their concerns, and as soon as the family contacted us, we launched an investigation process, which is where the corrective actions have come from. We'd never downplay something as serious as this.
He says that a manager from the DHB who's responsible for elderly care described what happened in the video as the caregiver patting Mr Hemi on the face. How do you account for that response?
That's not something I'm aware of. I haven't been directly involved in the detail of this. I trust my staff, and I know that they wouldn't downplay a serious issue like this.
Paul Keesing speaking to our reporter Joe O'Brien. Mr Keesing says he's confident patients at Cascades are now safe, and the DHB won't be reviewing its contract with the rest home facility or its monitoring systems. And the Sanderson Group, which owns Cascades, says in a statement it is shocked and disappointed at what is alleged to have occurred. It says Cascades takes the allegations very seriously and is fully cooperating with investigations. Coming up on Checkpoint, controversial businessman William Yan and 3 others have been ordered to hand over nearly $43 million worth of property in a record settlement over alleged money laundering. And 4 sponsors drop disgraced US Olympic swimmer Ryan Lochte. All of that and much more coming up. But first, with the time coming up to 26 minutes to 5, here's Katrina Batten with RNZ headlines. 26 to 6, sorry, Katrina.
The Havelock North rest home where an 89-year-old woman died is in lockdown following another outbreak of Campylobacter. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board has confirmed a unit at Mary Doyle Life Care is closed to visitors and 5 people are ill. A board spokesperson says it expected there might be another wave of illness, particularly among the elderly. Jean Sparksman, who lived at the Mary Doyle home, died almost a fortnight ago, 4 days after becoming ill from Campylobacter. The Hastings District Council has decided to supply Havelock North's water from the Hastings water system for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, a Hawke's Bay school is deciding what to do next after it closed this morning when E. coli was detected in its water. Homoana School is about 13 kilometres from Havelock North. The water is drawn from a private bore. The Waikato District Health Board says it's sorry the family of Piri Hemi isn't satisfied with its response. Mr Hemi was apparently assaulted at a rest home and his son has said he's disappointed by the authorities' response. A 23-year-old woman has been charged with assault at the Cascades retirement home in Hamilton in June after the Stuff website posted a video showing a caregiver slapping and mishandling Mr Hemi, who has dementia and limited mobility. The Justice Minister says there's been no formal request to extradite a controversial businessman who's fifth on Beijing's most wanted fugitives list. William Yan, who's also been known as Bill Liu, Yang Liu and Yongming Yan, will hand over almost $43 million worth of property in a record settlement over alleged money laundering. The government wants to let children study from home at online schools run by tertiary institutions, schools or private companies in a proposal which it says future-proofs the education system. But teacher unions say it's the opening door to wholesale privatisation of schooling and it has to be stopped. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 with more news, sport and weather.
Thank you, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with Giles Beckford. Giles, there was a fairly resolute defence by the Governor of the Reserve Bank, Graham Wheeler, on how he's conducting monetary policy today.
Yes, for Graham Wheeler, this was a set-piece defence for him. It was an opportunity to be able to lay out quite clearly why he's conducting policy the way it is. As the Chinese would say, these are interesting and, as Graham Wheeler would call it, turbulent times for central bankers.
Giles? Who's he defending himself from? Sorry, I know you're going to elaborate around the defence, what he's saying, but why is he feeling the need to say this?
Well, clearly there's been, first of all, a good deal of criticism from some financial commentators and analysts who said that he's not been aggressive enough. There are those political pressures that he's been feeling. On the one hand, we've had John Key and Bill English saying, well, just get on and do it. Get inflation there. And we've had Grant Robertson and others on the other side suggesting, well, the mechanisms that you've got and the policy approach that you have are broken. And we actually need to get back to actually reforming why we're doing what we do and how we conduct monetary policy. So he felt that he needs to actually stand up and wave the flag. He's got a year left in his contract. I'm willing to bet that he won't be either reapplying or he would not be reappointed anyway. But that's another thing for 12 months' time. But he needed to be able to say, this is the policy that I'm following and this is why I'm following it. And clearly today he laid out the three big issues that are there. One, that the policy approach of inflation targeting is broken. He says there's no evidence that there's anything better, and indeed to go and pursue other objectives such as economic growth or low unemployment would only confuse issue. The second one is that he should be more aggressive, so he should have been cutting all the way through this year rather than just a couple of cuts that he has made. He was saying, well, I didn't want to actually provoke volatility in financial markets, and one of his instructions from the government is don't cause any volatility in financial markets if you can help it. And he said there was actually no need for us to be cutting by, say, 0.5 percentage point. And then the third option was, well, just do nothing. Who needs to cut interest rates when your economy is actually going gangbusters at 3% or more? And he was saying, well, we actually need to get inflation back into the target band, and by doing nothing, it would make people think that we've given up the fight on inflation. And the last thing that this governor wants is entrenched inflation, low inflation expectations. He wants people to think that prices will rise, and consequently, that was the defence that he mounted today. I have to say that financial markets weren't particularly impressed. The New Zealand dollar, and this would really get up, I would think, Graham Wheeler's nose. The New Zealand dollar spiked up well past well past 73 cents. So I mean, the man can't win. I mean,
the poor bugger can't win.
He couldn't buy a trick.
No. I mean, we're used to Reserve governments being betwixt and between all these various pressures, but I can't recall one having to live this out quite so publicly and precariously as poor old Graham Wheeler does. Lots of company earnings today, Giles.
Yes, indeed. Just before we go, though, just say that I think Graham Wheeler has been, to some extent, the architect of his own discomfort, but we'll save that for another day.
Okay, yes, it's a big discussion. It's fascinating. I must be getting old because I'm finding the Reserve Bank Governor and his position absolutely fascinating. But what a balancing act.
I think you need to take up another hobby, John, really. Anyway, let's go to the company earnings. Mercury Energy, otherwise known as Mighty River Power in a former life, solid lift in profit, lower costs, asset sales, and the present of a special dividend for shareholders because it doesn't foresee the need for any big spending. Tourism Holdings having a stormer on the back of those record visitor numbers and a record profit from them. And they see that the tourism boom will keep going for another couple of years at least. Not so good for New Zealand refining. They made a lot of hay last year when the margins were really high and the oil prices were really low. I'm afraid the party's over and they had quite a coming down to earth, just a small first half year profit. The result was they got pretty hammered on the share market. And that share market number, I can tell you, the top 50 index, it nudged 5 points higher at 7,467. And the New Zealand dollar, courtesy of the Governor of the Reserve Bank, 73.2 US cents, 95.8 Australian. Good if you're travelling, bad if you're exporting.
Giles Beckford, our business editor, thanks so much. Giles Beckford live from Wellington. Controversial businessman William Yan and 3 others have been ordered to hand over nearly $43 million worth of property in a record settlement over alleged money laundering. Police say $42.85 million forfeiture order is the largest in New Zealand to date and the first that relates to crimes alleged to have occurred in China. Tom Furley reports.
The settlement is against William Yan, Wei Yu and 2 of Mr Yan's associates and follows discussions between the parties and approval by the High Court. The order marks the end of a complex 3-year investigation by New Zealand Police into the laundering of large sums of money from a series of frauds allegedly carried out in China between 1999 and 2001. The police say the settlement ends proceedings without any admission of criminal or civil liability. Mr Yan, who's also known as Bill Liu, Yang Liu and Yongming Yan, was granted citizenship in 2008 after the former Labour MP and Associate Immigration Minister Shane Jones overrode advice from officials. China's state-run media says he is wanted for corruption in that country and is listed on the most wanted fugitives list. In 2014, police got restraining orders for Mr Yan's property, including a central Auckland penthouse apartment, a number of luxury vehicles and substantial shareholdings. The Labour leader Andrew Little says if people commit crimes in New Zealand, they should face the justice system and not buy their way out.
Listen, I haven't looked close enough. I get concerned when issues of justice are dealt with by significant payments. We saw it with Pike River. So I need to look more closely at this to form a judgment about whether I think it's a good thing or a bad thing.
The Justice Minister Amy Adams says Chinese officials have asked what is required to extradite him.
I haven't had a formal extradition request. I understand that officials from China have made contact informally with my officials and expressed some interest and made some information gathering requests, but no extradition request.
The Prime Minister John Campbell would not say whether Mr Yan was mentioned by Chinese leaders during his visit earlier this year. The police say the next step is to decide how the seized money will be split between New Zealand and China. For Checkpoint, this is Tom Furley.
Pressure is mounting on the National Party to allow its MPs to cast a conscience vote on Easter trading legislation for its final reading rather than be forced to toe the party line, as is usually the case. All National MPs have told they must vote for a government bill that will let local councils decide whether shops in their areas open for business on Easter Sunday. That's despite the party's deputy leader saying he's personally opposed. The Labour Party says National has had to take this approach because if its MPs were allowed it to vote according to their conscience, the bill would fail. Our political reporter Benedict Collins has more.
The country's hodgepodge Easter trading laws are a source of great frustration for many shoppers and businesses. But for others, Easter Sunday is a sacred holiday. Shops in some tourist centres like Taupo and Queenstown are allowed to trade on Easter Sunday, whereas shops in other centres like Wanaka and Rotorua are not and can be fined if they open. The Prime Minister John Campbell describes how random Easter trading laws are.
And I think where the current laws are set is mad. Because if you go down the road from where I live, if you want to turn left at the top of my street, you hit Newmarket and you can't trade, and you go right and you are, because it's in Parnell, and Parnell was deemed to be a tourism hub and Newmarket wasn't.
Parliament has failed time and time again to pass legislation removing the Easter trading discrepancies. John Key says letting local councils make the decision is the only way around it.
Some people will be because of religious concerns. On the Labor side, often it's about the union concerns, but there's an impasse that you can't fix.
Traditionally, MPs have been allowed to vote on these issues according to their conscience. Labour's Pacific Island Affairs spokesman, Sua Williams-Seo, is calling on National Party MPs to disobey orders and do so again.
I think the government and many politicians in this House aren't aware that religion still has value to a sizable sector of New Zealand community. And Easter Sunday, Good Friday and Christmas Day still have values, a religious value to many people, but they also have value to workers in terms of days where they can spend time with their family and community.
The Deputy Prime Minister Bill English says he's opposed to shops being allowed to trade on Easter Sunday.
I generally oppose trading on Easter Sunday.
Do you think it should be a conscience vote?
Well, it's MPs have a vote. National Party's decided to vote on that legislation altogether.
But do you personally believe that it should be a conscience vote?
Well, we're voting on it as a party in this case.
The National MP, Alfred Naro, has voted against extending Easter trading laws in the past, but he says this time the government's got it right.
I think it's the best decision that can be made. I think what it does is put it back in the hands of local councils, local communities, and at the same time it has protections for employees as well. Look, if the community out in Mangere decide that's not the thing that they want, they don't want to have trading, they can actually choose to do that.
A petition is expected to be presented to Parliament by Pacific communities, asking MPs to reject the shop trading amendment bill. That bill could come before Parliament for its third and final reading later this week. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Benedict Collins.
Coming up to 14 minutes to 6, let's go to sport of a sort, I suppose. 4 sponsors have dropped disgraced US Olympic swimmer Ryan Lochte, including swimwear manufacturer Speedo and fashion label Ralph Lauren. It comes after Lochte lied, of course, about being robbed at gunpoint by a policeman after a night out during the Rio Olympics. Lochte, a 12-time Olympic medalist, has earned millions of dollars through endorsements. The BBC's Tony Bonsignor says Lochte may never race at the Olympics again.
Such a bizarre story in a way, as it's kind of unfolded, alleged robbery, and then, well, it wasn't a robbery, and what went on, and, you know, all these allegations that he was intoxicated, and, I mean, it's still not entirely clear what happened. What's pretty clear that it wasn't what Ryan Lochte said it was first time round, and what's also clear is that his sponsors weren't happy. We've had this kind of waiting game for the Olympics to finish, for them to make a decision on what to do. 4 main sponsors, Speedo, Ralph Lauren, the skincare company, Cinnabon, Candela and Airwave, and which makes mattresses, all waiting, I say, for the games to finish to make a decision. He would have been very nervous on edge to find out what they were going to say. He didn't have to wait long because this is what happened.
Speedo cannot condone behaviour that is counter to the values this brand has long stood for. We appreciate...
Ralph Lauren continues to proudly sponsor the US Olympic and Paralympic team. We will not be renewing Ryan Lochte's contract.
Cinnabon Candela holds its employees to high standards, and we expect the same of our business partners. We wish Ryan well on his future endeavours and thank him for the time.
Airweave has made the decision to end our partnership with Ryan Lochte. We remain committed to supporting...
The statements came in one by one, similar sort of corporate speak, but the message was the same. We have values, you weren't up to it, cheerio. The question is for Ryan Lochte. You know, he made his name in the 2012 Olympics. He's now got, 12 medals overall, but he's kind of broken his reputation with the Olympics as well. And what can he do to turn it round? He's probably not going to get another Olympics again to have another chance. So he's got these advisors, he's got an agent. Will he? The question is, should he apologise? The apologies he's given so far are not entirely convincing. I think he's got a long way to go before he rescues his reputation.
That's the BBC's Tony Bonsignor. And while the exact value of Lochte's lost contracts hasn't been revealed, the US business magazine Forbes calculated that in 2012, the year of the London Olympics, he earned about $2 million in sponsorships alone. People earning much less now. They were promised good pay, a week's food and accommodation, but when they arrived in New Zealand, they slept on a cold garage floor and had to work without any pay. That's the story told by a Fijian worker today who testified in the trial of Feroz Ali, who is facing 31 charges, including trafficking 16 Fijian workers into New Zealand. Immigration New Zealand says Mr Ali charged the workers large sums of money and facilitated their unlawful entry into the country and then employed them in breach of their visa conditions. Sally Murphy is covering the trial in the Auckland High Court.
Suliana Vitani Vula responded to a newspaper advert promising well-paid work in New Zealand. The Crown says the ad was placed by Mr Ali and his sister-in-law Sanjana, who worked as a travel agent in Suva. Ms Vitani Vula told the court she handed over thousands of Fijian dollars in order to secure a job and a visa. But when it arrived, it was a visitor's visa.
I asked her, you said that you're going to give us a work permit, a work visa. How will you give us a work visa if you're applying on a visitor's visa? And she said to me, once I get to New Zealand, there's an agent of hers in New Zealand. He will provide for the work permit in New Zealand.
Ms Vitani Vula said she and the 3 other workers she travelled with were told to write that they were visiting family in New Zealand on their passenger arrival cards. Under cross-examination by Mr Ali's defence, Peter Broad, Ms Vitani Vula admitted she was concerned.
But you knew, didn't you, that you weren't allowed to work on a visitor's visa, is that right?
Since it was the first time for us to come to New Zealand, we had no idea about the immigration procedures in New Zealand, so we thought that we'd get a visitor's visa from Fiji and get a work visa in New Zealand.
Ms Vitani Vula says when they arrived in Auckland, Mr Ali put the 4 workers on a bus to Tauranga, where they expected to live and work on a kiwi fruit farm. They ended up in a garage.
We all slept together in one room, the 4 of us, including the Indian boy. There was no beddings, nothing was provided. It was cold, and there was no mattress, no pillow blankets whatsoever.
She says they were promised $17 an hour, but after a month of working 6 or 7 days a week, all she received was $100, which she then had to split between the other workers. The defence says Mr Ali was not in Fiji when the newspaper ad was published and didn't know what had been promised to the workers. Tears rolled down Ms Vitani Vula's face when the Crown asked her how she felt when she returned to Fiji, virtually empty-handed.
When I went back to Fiji, people tend to look at me differently because I didn't have any money to pay them back. I tried very hard to pay them back, and at the moment, I still owe a lot of people a lot of money. And when I go out, I feel ashamed to see them because when I came to them for help, they were ready to help me. In return, I didn't do my part.
Over the next few weeks, the rest of the Fijian workers Mr Ali is accused of trafficking into the country will also give evidence. At the High Court in Auckland for Checkpoint, ko Sally Murphy tēnei.
8 minutes to 6, a Kurdish TV channel has broadcast quite extraordinary pictures of police removing an explosive belt from an 11-year-old boy in the northern Iraqi city of Kirkuk. The pictures show Iraqi police detaining the boy who was wearing a suicide belt. Kurdish TV shows the moment 2 policemen hold the shirtless boy while a 3rd officer tries to strip the explosive belt off the 11-year-old's body. The incident happened near a mosque in northern Iraq, which was, it's believed, being targeted. Police say the boy was carrying 2 kilograms of TNT explosives on his body. The boy's capture follows a deadly attack at a wedding on Saturday in Turkey, which the government says was carried out by a child between 12 and 14 years old, although there seems to be some discrepancy about the description of the age of the suicide bomber there. The newlywed Kurdish couple whose wedding day did turn to the most appalling carnage have now visited the site of the attack. The bomb attack in the southeast was the deadliest in Turkey this year. This report from Reuters' Deborah Latterbeck.
Scenes from Gaziantep, Turkey, Saturday night. More than 50 people were killed as they gathered to celebrate a Kurdish wedding. 22 were children. Now the Turkish bride and groom have returned to the site. The groom, Nurettin Akdogan, says, "They turned our best day into hell." He says they have no relatives left. They all died. His wife Besna beside him, overcome by grief. A family ripped apart. President Tayyip Erdogan said Sunday that the bomber was likely a child between the ages of 12 and 14. He says the evidence suggests Islamic State was behind the attack. And while Turkey has vowed to destroy Islamic State in its border region, the area is still a hotbed of violence.
That report from Reuters. It's 5.5 minutes to 6. We're going to escape a little bit, although it's not an escape for the people concerned as we approach the 6 o'clock news. It sounds a bit like an Agatha Christie book, we were thinking. It's a mystery noise, involves a sleepless couple and a Chinese restaurant. But for long-time Matamata residents, Lynn and Jonathan Beasley, it's not a tall tale, but a low hum. They can hear it very clearly. It's keeping them awake at night. And basically, they've had enough of it. But who else can hear it? Our reporter Alex Ashton went to investigate the mysterious buzzing noise that, well, not many other people can hear.
Matamata, 2 hours south of Auckland, is best known as the home of Hobbiton. The Beasleys love it here, or did until recently.
3 months ago, we came home and this noise started, just like a sort of a hum of an engine rumbling in the distance. And it hasn't stopped, night and day, ever since.
They can't sleep and say the noise, which they call penetrating, is ruining their lives. So they've desperately been searching for the source.
I put flyers all around the area asking people about DVS systems or anything new they'd had installed, whether they had heat pumps that perhaps needed servicing. Rodent deterrents had been mentioned.
The back neighbours turned off their pool pump. Those on either side turned off the power entirely. But the hum was still there. Then the Beasleys had a thought. The noise started when a new Chinese restaurant opened on their street.
So it made sense to start there and rule it out, or possibly confirm that that's where the noise was coming from.
Back to that restaurant shortly. The Beasleys' biggest issue is that while the noise is constant and droning to them, few others can hear it. Okay, so this is where the noise is. You guys can hear the noise?
Yeah, do you like my paintings?
I do like your paintings. They're very nice.
Thank you. Yes, so.
I don't know if I can.
Okay, go and stand by the door.
Indeed, even with the mains power switched off, I couldn't hear the noise. Just a slight rumble of traffic coming from the road. And nor could the Matamata Piako District Council when they went to investigate. Its Group Manager Community Development, Dennis Bellamy, says 2 council officers went to look and listen, but couldn't hear the buzz in question.
Well, there's nothing really that we can do at this point. The noise levels are clearly going to be below the 40 dBA. You can hear the vehicles going past. They aren't quite at 40 dBA, so the noise levels are not going to meet anywhere near there. So the only thing that our officers heard at the time was the traffic on the road going by.
As they mentioned before, Lynn and Jonathan Beasley suspect the culprit may be a new restaurant. A local electrician suggested it could be their pest control machine. So they want the owner, Jim Ledbetter, to switch off the power to rule it out as a suspect. Jim doesn't run the restaurant but owns it and the adjoining Gull petrol station.
If she can prove where the noise is coming from, I'll definitely do something about it. And over that time, I've been down there 3 times, early hours of the morning, heard no noise. The council have been involved and they can't hear anything. We've asked the neighbours, they can't hear any noise. And they've even been around to my home here and we've had a meeting with them. And we've helped them as much as we can, but we can't do any more than what we've done.
And Jim Ledbetter says if the Beasleys want him to switch off the power to rule out the restaurant, they need to ask an electrician to do it.
They've got to be careful doing that. The fire alarm can be set off once you turn the power off, and someone's got to pay to put that back on.
So, for now, the Beasleys' options seem limited. They've looked at moving to escape the buzz, but say they can't afford it.
It's very difficult to believe in a sound that one might not be able to hear yourself. That's just human nature. If it weren't keeping us awake, we wouldn't care.
For the Beasleys, it seems the sleepless nights look set to continue. For Checkpoint, Alex Ashton.
Much discussions erupted. Well, they didn't really erupt, they just took place in a reasonably civilised fashion around the office about hums that some people can hear and some people can't. If you can hear a hum, We'd love to hear from you. Text us on 2101 or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Brenda has emailed in saying, while I have some sympathy for Havelock North businesses, they are no different from many New Zealand businesses who face some tough times. I've had a business for 20 years. We've had storms, power cuts, extensive roadworks, staff with flu and tummy bug outbreaks, etc. But in any business, there are highs and lows, and you have to take the bad with the good. Why does every business owner think they should be able to lay blame somewhere and receive compensation for a downturn for whatever reason? Come on, Havelock North business owners, suck it up and get on with it, says Brenda. I guess, Brenda, in Havelock North, they would say, yes, all of those things happen, storms and power cuts and stuff. Very often they are acts of God. In this case, it was a contamination in a municipal water supply. Does that make a difference to compensation claims? We'd love your feedback on this. Text us on 2101 or email. Here's the pips. Kia ora everyone, kia ora everyone. Whatever's happening in the world, the pips always get through. They are a constant, and we're delighted to welcome you after them to RNZ Checkpoint at 6 o'clock. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, what support our Havelock North residents are going to get. There seems to be some real confusion about this. The tractor's trundling 2,000 kilometres to go and support Sir Edward's Antarctic hut. The family of a man killed by a foreign driver. This is the Dunedin motorcyclist who has donated his organs. His family is speaking out about the sentence that the man whose careless driving killed him is likely to get. All of that and more in the next 30 minutes, but here's the news first. RNZ News with Katrina Batten.
Ngā mihi nui, good evening. The Havelock North rest home where an 89-year-old woman died is in lockdown following another outbreak of Campylobacter. The Hawke's Bay District Health Board has confirmed a unit at the Mary Doyle Life Care is closed to visitors and 5 people are ill. A board spokesperson says it expected there might be another wave of illness, particularly amongst the elderly. Jean Sparksman, who lived at the Mary Doyle home, died almost a fortnight ago, 4 days after becoming ill from Campylobacter. Chlorination may be widened in Hawke's Bay after Homoana School closed today due to E. coli contamination in its drinking water. The school, which is a considerable distance from Havelock North, increased water testing of its private bore in the wake of the Campylobacter outbreak, and last week's test was clear. But a retest returned a positive E. coli result this morning, so the supply has been disconnected. Hastings District Council's Water Services Manager, Brett Chapman, says it's considering chlorinating the bores, delivering water to Homoana, Clive and Te Awanga. Meanwhile, the council has decided to supply Havelock North's water from the Hastings water system for the foreseeable future. The government wants to change the law so children can leave regular schools and study from home at online schools. The government says it's future-proofing the education system, but teacher unions say it's opening the door to privatisation. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen reports.
The proposed change to the Education Act would let companies, schools and tertiary institutions set up online schools known as communities of online learning. The PPTA and the NZEI say the only reason for the change is to let companies profit from taxpayer spending on schools. Government documents say only Te Kura, which used to be called the Correspondence School, can offer distance schooling, and that needs to change because technology is blurring the lines between face-to-face and online learning. This is John Gerritsen.
The Waikato District Health Board says it won't be reviewing its contract with a rest home where a patient was apparently mistreated. A 23-year-old woman has been charged with assault at the Cascades home in Hamilton in June. The charge comes after the Stuff website posted a video showing a caregiver slapping and mishandling dementia patient Pirihemi. The DHB's Senior Planning Manager, Paul Keesing, says it won't be reviewing the rest home or its monitoring systems.
We do have a monitoring function that happens through Health Cert. They do certification audits and unannounced surveillance audits. The last audit at Cascades was actually in July 2015, which showed to us no areas of concern, and we won't be reviewing the contract.
Paul Keesing says the care shown in the video is clearly unacceptable and the rest home has until the end of the month to take corrective actions. The police are inquiring into the disappearance of rare paintings from a Māori trust board in the King Country. The Maniapoto Trust Board has laid a complaint after they were removed from the building in Te Kuiti. Portraits of Dr. Pei Te Hurinui Jones, Dame Rangimarie Hetet and Dr. Henare Tuwhangai are among the missing paintings. The Deputy Chair, Keith Aiken, says it's been devastating for descendants of the kaumātua. A man has told Te Kaya News he took the paintings because he was the rightful owner. Mr Aiken disputes this, saying board minutes prove the trust is the rightful owner.
In our view, those paintings belong to the people of Maniapoto and don't belong in the hands of an individual. He was very much the instigator of those paintings being commissioned, but it is also our view that undertaking happened on behalf of the board and those costs were met by the board.
Keith Aiken. The paintings were done by John Willits. Emergency services have been using a drone to help search for an 18-year-old missing since the boat he was on capsized off the coast of New Plymouth yesterday morning. The drone is being used to video the ocean side of the breakwaters at Port Taranaki as the focus of the search shifts north towards the Waifakaiho River. MPs have congratulated the New Zealand Olympic team for their record-breaking performance in Rio. New Zealand won 18 medals at the Olympics, 5 more than in London 4 years ago, and double the number in Beijing in 2008. The 170-strong Olympic team lands in Auckland early tomorrow morning. The Labour Party leader, Andrew Little, told Parliament it was wonderful to see established athletes excel, but also watch new young New Zealanders shine.
Jack O'Gill, Tom Walsh, and of course the amazing Eliza McCartney. The success of these young Kiwis is a great sign of things to come, and we should be very hopeful for future Olympics.
The Labour leader, Andrew Little. In sport, the Australian rugby coach Michael Cheika says trying to turn around the team's fortunes against the All Blacks is probably the biggest challenge of his career. The Wallabies lost 42-8 in front of a home crowd in Sydney on Saturday, and Cheika admits his players didn't perform.
The reality is that the Australian team didn't play well that day. You know, since I've been here, we've always, win or loss, we've always been, pretty true to our identity. And that's the first time I don't think that we have.
Michael Cheika says it's his job to ensure his players don't get dragged down by criticism and instead use it as motivation. The Black Caps batsmen are desperate to spend some time facing the vaunted South African bowling attack before the second cricket test. With only 1 day of cricket left in the first test in Durban, the match looks destined for a draw after heavy rain on the weekend left the outfield muddy and dangerous and resulted in the loss of 2 days' play. Tonight, New Zealand will resume their first innings on 15 for 2, trailing by 258 runs, and Ross Taylor is hoping the batsmen get some practice at the crease.
Anytime you play a bowling lineup with Steyn, Philander, Rabada, it's a world-class bowling lineup, and they know how to bowl in these conditions. One more day of Test cricket here in Durban, and we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
Ross Taylor. Play is scheduled to start at 8 o'clock. And the Waikato Bay of Plenty Magic have announced the Silver Ferns veterans Casey Korpua and Grace Rasmussen have signed on for this season's domestic netball championship. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, a beginner's guide to Fashion Week with my colleague and sartorial wizard, Sonia Sly. We have a window on the world of cruise ships, one of the great tourism booms of the early 21st century, and Kerwin discusses the very rational thinking of Benedict Spinoza. And our Wome delight is the Ukrainian quartet Daka Braka on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather to midnight tonight in the north from west, tomorrow I should say, in the north and west from Northland to Wellington, including Bay of Plenty in the central high country. High cloud increasing tomorrow and rain developing in the afternoon or evening, possibly heavy about Auckland and Northland later. For Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, cloud and drizzle spreading north tomorrow morning. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland mainly fine but late drizzle for coastal Marlborough, rain developing tomorrow afternoon or evening. Otago and Canterbury, cloud increasing, patchy drizzle developing about eastern areas later today. Tomorrow rain developing in the afternoon or evening with snow to about 600 metres inland. Southland mainly fine with scattered rain late tomorrow. For Fiordland, rain at times, and the Chatham Islands, showers and cold southerlies developing tonight, then clearing later tomorrow. It's coming up to 6:09.
Thanks, Katrina. Chlorination may be widened in Hawke's Bay after a school with a private bore discovered E. coli in its water. Homoana School, which is a considerable distance from Havelock North, actually it's about sort of 10 to 15 k's, was closed today after the discovery. The Hastings District Council is now considering chlorinating the bores, delivering water to Homoana, Clive and Te Awanga. It's also decided to supply Havelock North's water from the Hastings water system for the foreseeable future. We should stress the Homoana bore is a private bore, and there is no confirmation yet whether the E. coli is a false positive like in that truck last week or actually has been confirmed. Now, all of these moves will allow the contaminated Brookvale bores in Havelock North to be turned off. Havelock's contamination, which has sickened 4,000 people, has had a devastating effect on the town. Winds is now making special assistance available to those who've lost income as a result of the outbreak. Annie Aranui is Winds Social Development Regional Commissioner for the East Coast, and she joins us now on the phone. Kia ora, Annie, are you there?
Kia ora, yes I am.
Nice to talk to you. What can you tell us? So, can we go through loss of income assistance for individuals? What will be made available?
So, working income, we may be able to help people's costs, even if they don't have any other way of paying, even if they're not on a benefit. So, in particular, there could be financial assistance available to people who've lost wages due to their own illness or where they've been caring for family members, or due to workplace or school closures. And that loss of income payment, it does not need to be repaid.
Okay, so that's a one-off. Who qualifies for that?
Those are any employees. It's not an income tested. So what we're asking people to do is to either go onto our website to www.workingincome.govt.nz or to call us on 0800 559 009 and we can talk to them about their payment.
Okay, and once they are, so what sort of evidence or support do they have to provide around costs, loss of income? What sort of material are you after from people?
So if we have the identity, or if this person is known to us, we can actually go through those details on the phone and make that payment on the phone. If that person is not known to us because they've been working, we'll ask them to come in and we'll talk to them about their last day of work due to illness. When did they get their last payment from work?
Okay, what sort of sum are we talking about here? What amount can people get if they're eligible?
The amounts depend on their situation and their children, but for example, a single person from 18 to 24 for no dependents could have a weekly payment of around $175. But again, we'll talk to individuals about their individual circumstances.
Okay, what about for an employer? If, for example, an employer is seriously out of pocket and can only pay some or part or none of somebody's wages, how is this all going to be balanced?
So we'll talk to, this is for employees.
Yep.
And also for employers, we ask them to contact us so that we can talk to them about their situation as well. And again, if they could contact us on 0800 559 009.
0800 559 009.
That's right.
Or the website, the web address again, Annie?
Is www.workingincome.govt.nz.
Okay, and the information's readily accessible there.
Yes, it is.
And also people can go into your, if you don't have an office in Havelock North, you have one in Hastings, obviously. People can go into the office, or would you prefer they didn't do that?
They can go into our Hastings office, but it may be possible that we can make that payment by telephone, so we'd encourage them in the first instance to call us.
Annie Aranui from Winds, thank you very much indeed for that information. Now, we were talking to Lawrence Yule before the news about obviously compensation for businesses. We spoke to a business just after 5 o'clock who was tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket. This is quite separate from the sums that Winds are talking about. They're fairly small sums Winds are talking about. And the Hastings District Council are looking to go back to businesses later in the week with something for them, some form of package or other. Meanwhile, the government has faced questions in Parliament about why money to help small councils deliver clean drinking water is no longer available. Remember, it's drinking water that's behind all of this. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
Much of the political debate has been about what may have caused the contamination and what the government has or has not done in response. Labour's health spokesperson Annette King asked the Health Minister Jonathan Coleman in Parliament about a fund that had until recently been available to small councils.
Has the recent Havelock North drinking water crisis and the latest crisis at Haumawana School convinced him to reverse his decision to discontinue funding of the subsidy scheme for small communities to upgrade their drinking water supply?
Well,
the Honourable Dr Jonathan
the member
Coleman.
should remember that it was actually the Labor government that started the scheme. It was a time-limited 10-year scheme, so they always intended for it to finish. And it was actually for populations less than 5,000. Havelock North is considerably more. So she's a bit in danger of becoming sort of the Ryan Lochte of the Parliament, making stuff up, exaggerating, and then having to apologise.
But that did not deter Ms King.
If the government is really committed to improving drinking water quality in New Zealand, why did they freeze the subsidy scheme in 2009, then restrict access to the scheme in 2011, then underspend the original funding by $20 million in 2015, and finally cancel the scheme altogether last year?
The Honourable Dr
Once
Jonathan
again, the
Coleman.
member's conflating a couple of arguments. I mean, it was always a time-limited scheme. In actual fact, Labor always had restrictions around the scheme, so it was limited to decile 4 communities and higher. And no applicant who qualified under the criteria of the scheme did not receive a subsidy.
Ms King then asked Dr Coleman why he had ignored the head of local government New Zealand and Hastings Mayor Lawrence Yule when he asked for the drinking water fund to be reinstated.
Saying that the scheme provided vital funding support for small communities who cannot afford to upgrade their drinking water.
The Honourable
I haven't
Dr.
been
Jonathan
ignoring
Coleman.
him. I speak to him regularly and in fact spoke to him this morning. The point about that scheme I think has been well covered. It was a time-limited scheme started by that member's party and it had run its course, and in the end all applicants who fulfilled the criteria received a subsidy.
From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
16 minutes past 6. The family of a motorcyclist killed in a road crash earlier this month, in fact only 8 days ago, say a maximum 3-month sentence for the foreign driver involved is an insult. Chinese national Li Minma today pleaded guilty to careless driving, causing the death of Dunedin photographer Riley Baker on State Highway 1 near Shag Point. We had Riley's girlfriend on the program last week, of course. Riley's older sister Sarah says police warned her that the maximum sentence Ma can receive is 3 months in prison. She just doesn't think that's long enough, and the family is struggling to cope with how very quickly everything's happening. Riley's death, today's court appearance, and the requirement for victim impacts reports for sentencing early next month.
We're coping the best that we can. I mean, I think we're all for, a big part of it's still in shock. And it's only been 8 days since he passed, so we're still really coming to terms with, what death means for Riley. And I mean, it's my birthday next week, and he was meant to be coming. And so even just little things like that, I don't really want to celebrate my birthday anymore. And just all those little things, and it stops and it makes you realise how much we're going to miss him. And yeah, it's hard.
So in the space of 8 days, there's been a guilty plea, you have to prepare for sentencing, you have to consider restorative justice, and you have to write a victim impact statement really fast. Gosh, that's quick, isn't it?
It's really fast. It's scary fast. It would have been nice to have a little bit more time to process everything and prepare ourselves for all this, but I guess that's just the way things work in New Zealand.
Sarah, if you do give your victim impact statement, what is it that you will say? What is it you want to say?
I just want the judge to understand how precious Riley's life was to him and to us and to all his other friends and loved ones, and that it has to be worth more than 3 months jail, and that other tourists need to understand that if they come to our country, that they're not just going to get a slap on the hand and sent back home if they kill somebody because they make mistakes, because they don't know how to drive properly on our roads.
Can we talk about the very big issue of Riley's organ donation, which is such a wonderful gift, and is such a meaningful gift and such a lovely reflection of him.
Yeah.
And have you been updated on how all of that is going?
Yeah, I was updated yesterday, and honestly, it's the only thing really that's positive that's come out of this. So it's the only thing we have to hold on to. But we were told that a 1-year-old girl received a small piece of his liver, and a teenage boy received his heart, and all his other organs were also successfully donated to young people and a couple of middle-aged men as well. So that was really, really good to hear that young people especially were benefiting from this horrible, horrible thing.
It's a silly thing to say, and I can't find the words, so forgive me, Sarah, but you must be proud of that.
I am proud of that, yeah. It's what he would have wanted. He always said, it would be a waste to leave it in a box. So, it's pretty special that he can carry on life for those 6 people.
Riley Baker's older sister, Sarah, talking to us from Oamaru earlier this afternoon. It's coming up to 20 minutes past 6. Disability and school groups fear disabled children will be shortchanged by a huge shift of special needs funding from schools to under 5-year-olds. The government has proposed the move as part of its overhaul of the special education system. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
About 20% of children in the education system are in early childhood education, but they get just 5% of the $600 million a year spent on special needs. Government documents suggest changing that significantly, so the most money is spent on children aged 3 to 5 years. The CEO of CCS Disability Action, David Matthews, says under 5s need more help from special education.
Research would show that if we can get significant support into young people at an early age, then the likelihood of positive outcomes, not just in education but in life as a whole, are certainly much greater. And I think we need to do that.
But Autism Action, Youth Law, the Educational Institute and the Secondary Principals Association say it should not happen at the expense of children in schools. They say the government should increase total funding instead of moving resources from one area to another. The NZEI President Louise Green says the government needs to be cautious in its approach.
You can't take away from one area and put it in another area if there's still need for the older kids. So it's really important that this is done with care and responding to where the real needs are for children and for young people, and that actually there is enough resourcing in the system to support all of those kids that need it.
During questions in Parliament, Labour's education spokesperson Chris Hipkins asked the Education Minister Hekia Parata whether the change would mean some special needs children would miss out.
How many students who currently receive additional support with their learning will have to stop receiving that support or receive a reduced level of support in order to meet the indicative reduction in spending on school-age students illustrated in Appendix 2 of her Cabinet paper?
Hekia Parata says the funding changes would be phased in.
What we're looking at, based on a year's worth of consultation with the sector, is how do we redesign the service going forward without compromising the service for those who are currently in it. So there will be a long transition.
Ms Parata says there's no proposal to cut overall funding to special education. She says the change will ensure the $600 million spent in the sector is going to the right child at the right time. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
The former head of the Wellington Tents Trust, who's on trial in the High Court on alternative charges of fraud and corruption, had to take a break from giving evidence this afternoon due to ill health. The Crown accuses Sunatata of selling his influence to a property developer, which subsequently paid $1.5 million into a company run by his partner. Most of that money is said to have been used to pay down a mortgage on the couple's home. Our court reporter Anne-Marie May is following the trial.
Earlier in the trial, the court heard that a company owned by Sunatata's son Matane Love had been paid $150,000 in return for giving the developers first right of refusal on the Pipitea Street project. However, in cross-examination today, the defendant told the Crown prosecutor Grant Burston he didn't know his son had a company and he didn't know about the payment made to it.
He would have told you that the developers were going to pay his company $1.5 million around 14 August?
No.
So is your position that Martinet never told you about that arrangement that he'd come to with the developers at that stage?
Yes.
Sir Ngātata was also closely questioned by the Crown Prosecutor Grant Burston about the property purchased on the Kapiti coast, which he, his partner Lorraine Skiffington and one of his daughters shared. He said he agreed to help with that purchase, but understood he would be taken out of the agreement as soon as Ms Skiffington's home in Kandala had sold. The court was shown a copy of Sir Ngātata's driving licence, annotated from Dr R.N. Love, which was faxed to the Westpac Bank ahead of the deposit on the property being paid.
Do you accept that you probably sent that to open the account from which the deposit was paid?
No.
Why did you send your driver's licence to that Westpac fax number?
I was obviously asked to send it. I don't know why.
By whom?
I don't know.
After Sir Ngātata felt unwell, 2 character witnesses gave evidence that he has integrity and is honest and principled. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
3 tractors are going to travel from Auckland to Aoraki Mount Cook in the South Island, of course, if you've just arrived from outer space, in a bid to save Sir Edmund Hillary's historic Antarctic hut, nearly 60 years after it was built. The Expedition South campaign has started a fundraising drive to raise $1 million to restore the hut at Scott Base. Sir Ed's family is backing the campaign big time, with his son Peter Hillary at the start line on Piha Beach, west of Auckland City this morning. Mohammed Hassan was there.
So, this front one here, this is your tractor, isn't it?
Yes, this is my tractor. It's a 1954 TE20 Ferguson. So it's the same tractor as Ed took to the pole in 1958. We're travelling from Piha to Mount Cook, and that's 2,020 kilometres, which is the same distance as Ed drove from Scott Base to the South Pole.
Al Fastier, the program manager for the Antarctic Heritage Trust based in Christchurch, will soon be swapping Auckland for Scott Base, where he'll be repairing the iconic Trans-Antarctic Expedition hut. It was the first hut built at the camp by Sir Edmund Hillary when he made the long trip to the South Pole in 1958. For the next 4 weeks, these 3 tractors will cover that same distance, albeit on dry land.
It's going to be a long, slow trip. The tractors only travel about 18 kilometres an hour, which is about the same speed as riding a push bike.
Right. I can't imagine what 2,000 kilometres on this thing would feel like.
Yeah, I think we might be comfortably numb at the end of it, but yeah, we've got a few challenges. The first one today, driving through Auckland City, and then we've got some really bad weather forecast.
Sir Ed's son, Peter Hillary, drove the first tractor on Piha Beach, along the track named for his father.
The Hillary Trail comes through the Waitakere Ranges here, so this is the start point for the journey. And the tractors are going to wind their way through New Zealand, the back roads, small towns and communities, interacting with people, raising funds for the conservation work of New Zealand's first base.
The expedition hut is badly in need of restoration, with a leaking roof, pools of melted ice and snow under the floorboards, and it's also riddled with asbestos.
You know, if you asked my father, and I think this is very typical of really his generation, they'd say, look, it served its purpose, it gave us shelter from the storm when we needed it, maybe it's had its time. But I think as we sort of move into the future, you suddenly realise this is an historic building. The New Zealanders who did the science there, built the base, drove their audacious Ferguson farm tractors across Antarctica to reach the South Pole.
The Expedition South project has already raised more than $500,000. The team hopes to raise the remainder by the time the tractors reach Mount Cook on September 20. For Checkpoint, Ko Mohammed Hassan Tenne.
Thanks, Mohammed. Just before we go, the leaders of the Eurozone's biggest economies emerged from talks saying the bloc must move forward in the aftermath of Britain's shock decision to leave the European Union, Brexit. Deborah Lutterbeck with this report.
European leaders gather in Italy to discuss their future. But they first pay tribute to the past. Italian President Matteo Renzi, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, and French President François Hollande paid their respects at the tomb of the Italian intellectual seen as one of the founding fathers of European unity. The visit was a symbolic gesture as the trio met to discuss the way forward for the European Union, following Britain's shock referendum in June to abandon the 28-nation bloc. They later boarded the Garibaldi for a final news conference.
Many people thought that after Brexit, Europe was finished. That isn't the case. We respect the choice of the British citizens, but we want to turn a new leaf for the future.
Merkel offered her assurances to other members of the EU.
While we respect Great Britain's decision, we of course want to reassure the other 27 countries that they can count on a safe and prosperous Europe.
Hollande spoke of a way forward.
Biggest risk Europe and the European countries face is disintegration, fragmentation, egotism, and countries shutting themselves in. We have a responsibility to address that, and we are assuming that responsibility here today.
The meeting was designed to lay the groundwork for an EU summit next month.
That report from Reuters ending Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you for being with us. It's really great to have your company. It's coming up to 6:30 on RNZ National. We will be back tomorrow night at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Hastings District Council has decided to supply Havelock North's water from the Hastings system in the wake of the Campylobacter epidemic. And chlorination may be extended to other parts of Hawke's Bay after Homoana School closed due to E. coli being found in its drinking water. The government wants to change the law so children can leave regular schools and study from home at online schools. The Waikato District Health Board says it will not review its contract with Rest Home, where a patient was apparently mistreated. And emergency services have been using a drone to help search for an 18-year-old missing since a boat capsized off the coast of New Plymouth yesterday morning. Our next news and weather is at 7. This is trending now on RNZ National at 6:30. Our feature highlighting the stories you've been sharing via digital and social media.